Welcome back to Ultra Uncovered. I'm Russell Ditzworth, as always, joined by Corinne Shalvoy. And today we're peeling back the layers of a race in the Northwest, Chuckanut 50K in Bellingham, Washington.
And we are today joined by a very, very special guest, the race director herself, Krissy Moehl. Krissy, welcome. Thank you for being here.
I love that you guys are doing this. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just for anyone, I'm sure everyone listening to this will know who you are, but in case they do not, I want to give a brief introduction or overview. I mean, essentially, Krissy, you're an absolute legend within our sport. You've raced at the highest level for over 2 decades. And I would say, personally, I think of you as just a true kind of pioneer, not only in female endurance sports, but also in female race directing. We'll talk more about that as we get into Chuckanut. I mean, you've stood atop the podium of many of the biggest races in the world, UTMB, Mont Blanc twice, second place at Western States. And I think that any of the major hundreds or races in the US, if we went through your ultra sign up of over 120 finishes, just on that platform alone, not including the UTMB platform, you've probably won them at some point in time. Personally, I would love to catch up at a later time about Cascade Crest, because I got into that race this year and I've never run it. Yeah, I'd love to pick your brain on that one. Basically, you're a legend. We are super happy to have you here. And first of all, thank you for everything you've done for the sport.
Amazing. Quite an introduction. I wondered what was going to happen. That was incredible. And I feel like I'm of the earlier era that not everybody does. Like I was before social media.
Yeah,
like winning Hard Rock. Like that, there was a finished video on YouTube, and that was like a first. Nobody'd ever put a video on YouTube before of a finish.
That's amazing. So, we're gonna have to find that one. But now it's live streamed, and everyone can see the descent down Grand Swamp Pass, like live and in person, and it's just
on drone footage. Yeah,
exactly.
If anything, I'm a legend in the fact that I've seen it all change so much.
Yeah. Well, you're also an author and now commentator and continuing to be very involved in the sport. So it's amazing to have you as part of the overarching community.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate all that.
Of course. Yeah. So the way that we're going to talk about the race itself first. We're going to ask you some things about the course and about just all of the details to try to give listeners an idea of what they would be in for if they signed up for Chuckanut. And then we're going to go into kind of a bit more of an interview around your experience, not only racing Chuckanut, but race directing as a female, and some of the changes you've seen over the years with the race itself. So to start off, just tell us a little bit about, I have a question here because it appears that maybe Chuckanut was your first ultra. Is that true? And how did you learn about it?
I was working at the Seattle running company with the Scott Jurek and Scott McCubry. And it's only in hindsight that I don't know that we knew it in the moment, but in hindsight, you can see like that was like the hub of ultra running in the Pacific Northwest was out of that little store. And I just happened to work there, and I was studying abroad and came back, and Scott Jurek was folding clothes, and he just won his first Western States, and Scott McCubry had just bought the store. And I went in like, hey, can I have my job back? I was studying abroad for a couple quarters, and the store sold. And so like just going on Sunday morning trail runs with those guys, they were training for the Chuckanut 50K. And I grew up 14 miles from the race start. My parents still live in that same house. And I invited everybody to come up, and we took over my parents' basement. There was people on sleeping pads lit like all over the house, and we all went.
The original ultra house.
Yeah, totally. Original ultra flop house. And the Chuckanut, we all ran the race, and I was the first female that year in 2000, like unknowing. I stopped running on the University of Washington cross country and track teams to work in the store and pay back the debt I had incurred by living overseas, and then fell into this sport. And I just remember running along the ridge. I was wearing a fleece vest, like just all men's clothing. There wasn't like cute women's clothing. And like running along this ridge in the pouring down sideways rain, going, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. Like I just had this knowing so cool. At 21 years
22,
old.
According to Ultra Sign Up.
Okay. Yeah.
Wow.
Sounds good. Yeah. And then we went on spring break the week after to the Bahamas. So like that was my introduction to the world of ultra running.
So how did you go from there to then being the race director only a few years later?
Totally. The founders, Richard West and Doug McKeever, decided that they were done after 10 years and nobody took it on. Nobody took the race directorship. And so the race was in March of 2003. I'd run it and won it again. And then I think it was like May or June. I was married at the time, and my husband and I went to Doug and Richard and said, hey, we'll take it. Like, we don't want this thing to die. I didn't want it to die. It was my first love. And yeah, they just basically handed over the reins. I sat there with a little notebook and wrote down all the little information that they had. A lot of it was like clipboards and bib tag tear-offs. It was teamed up with the local running club for insurance purposes. There was like one permit that cost $25. It was a much smaller scale deal. And that was in 2000 and I guess. So 2003 was my first year as race director.
Well, thank goodness that you guys didn't let it die, because it's become an icon and a staple in the trail running world. And I think, yeah, like one question I have around it is just kind of, how do you think that it is sustained kind of this, like, it attracts a very competitive field, and I don't know if it always did, but it seems to just keep doing so year after year. And what is it about either the course or just like the time of year or like the atmosphere that you think kind of brings people in? Or do you, as a race director now, like actively seek out that kind of group of people to come? Because it's also a big race.
It is large. We've grown it quite a bit over, especially in the last like 10 years. The field size we're kind of butting up. I think we're bumping up against what might be our max. I'm at that point, 23 years doing it, like pushing the edges a little bit. Like what can we do? What works with the city? What, like those kind of pieces. Sorry, I just got down the track and what was the question? The specific.
Yeah. So just thinking about kind of what you said in the last 10 years, you have like grown it and brought more in, but like, is there something about either the course itself or the atmosphere that you think is attractive to just like this big of it? Because to my knowledge, it's never necessarily been like, a race for something else. It's not like a Western States qualifier. It's not a golden ticket race. It is, it stands alone, yet it's still continued to really thrive.
Gotcha. Yeah. Thanks for refreshing.
No worries. Yeah.
Brarian has been in a lot of different spaces the last
it's all good.
hours. Yeah. We've had a really competitive field over the years, and I honestly can't point my finger on exactly what to attribute it to. I wonder if in part it's my traveling around the world and just for like talking about the event, please come, inviting friends, like over the years, that's kind of gone through different iterations of who's competitive at the time. We've seen them like all kind of come through, which I think is quite an honor. I think it's so fun that the Hayden Hawks and Max Kings, but back to Scott Jureks and Hal Kerners and Ian Torrance, like Ellie Greenwood and Jody Adams Moore and Keeley, like all these names of all different generations of the sport just keep coming through here, and we get it every year. I think the craziest thing to watch change is like now I get resumes and I have sponsors contact me to get their runner in the race. Like we all just spoke for ourselves those early years, and now who's attracted and how it comes through has changed over the years.
It's changed. Yeah.
What I like attribute the size and the volume is our local community. Like I lived here, I grew up in the area, and then I moved away. I went to school in Seattle and then moved to Boulder and Bend and tried to prove the Pacific Northwest wasn't home, but I always came home in March to put on this race. And I moved back here in 2015, and I was just in awe and felt super in love with this community because I would like hear about the local 50K or our 50K. I'd be like, which one are you talking about? Oh, the one in March. And there's just this ownership of this event, and they had no idea who the race director was. Like this community just comes in and supports this event. So it's got this local vibe, but then it's also got the ultra. So it's got the local community, and then it's got the ultra community that both come together in Bellingham in what can be rather crap weather, to be honest, the third weekend of March. And it creates this awesome synergy and vibe. And the last 3 years, knock on wood, we've had beautiful weather. So there's like, it's amplified by a sunny day in March in the Pacific Northwest. So I give a lot of credit to like all the energy that comes around it. It's not just any one thing. Like we can talk about the course at some point, but I mean, personally, there's some fun sections on the course. It's not the course I would put together. It's the one I inherited.
Okay. Okay. Interesting.
Thanks to Dave Terry. He was the one that told me it's a classic, don't ever change it. And he passed away in 2009. His memory will stay on this race as long as the permitting agencies will let me hold the course as is. This is how we'll do it. So yeah, I guess I give a lot of credit to lots of different pieces, and I can't put my finger on the one reason why. This is why. I'd add one more, the rust buster. Like March, like everybody's got their excuses for what to train through or how to get through the winter, or so it's kind of this rust buster. How are you doing? Checkpoint, who shows up? It is a season opener, if you will. But there's those all over the country at this point. Like wherever you live, there can be your local season opener.
So that's amazing. So yeah, so let's get into, because I have questions based on what you just said, but to get into the course itself and just describe it a little bit for listeners. Around 31 miles, just over 5,000 feet of gain, which is condensed really, it seems like in that middle like 18 or so, because it's like 6 on the front, 6 on the back or so that are very, how would you describe those first and last miles?
The first and last, it's called the interurban. Old gravel paths. Parts of it are even paved now. It wasn't originally, but there's it's an access point for some driveways, but it's an easy 6 miles. There's 500 feet of loss in the start. So over 6 miles, not so noticeable. That same return miles where those 500 feet are net gain, you notice
definitely feel those. Yeah.
In the last 6 miles, people are like, why? Like the first part wasn't this hard. Why is this tail end so hard? So yeah, little key.
Yeah.
That's coming off the middle 18. You have a 3 mile descent before you shoot north on the interurban, and you're just like, free speed, gravity. Like it's a really runnable, beautiful trail. And so people blow through the aid station that we have positioned at the bottom of the hill at the start of the herb. And they're like, I'm great. It's only 6 miles to go. And inevitably they get 2 miles out and are like, oh no, 4 miles feels real long if you forgot to take some fuel for that, especially when you've got 26 plus miles on your legs.
Totally.
And that is one of the crewable aid stations, correct? Is it just like that one and then as you're entering, so nothing in the middle 18, correct?
That's mostly for access, especially as the race has gotten so big. There's one road that is drivable, and we're putting people at risk, and the runners run on the same road that crews would be accessing. So just to keep traffic down and safety priority. Yeah. We ask people to park at Larrabee State Park. Crew at the first one, go into Fairhaven. There's awesome treats, coffee shops, restaurants, all Village Books, great places to hang out, and then come back and crew your person if you want to, or just come meet us at the park and hang out there. We've got food trucks and all the sponsors set up vendor booths and interactive things. We have a kids race at 10 a.m. that we added 3 years ago. That's a sweet story. So we want to encourage
How long is that one?
It's a half-mile loop right around Fairhaven Park that they do as many loops as they can in a half an hour. It's really fun.
It's a backyard ultra kids style.
So cute. Yeah, it's really fun. And the local Girls on the Run chapter comes out and cheers everybody on. $10 of every $25 entry fee goes directly to Girls on the Run. It's mostly like we've got a half an hour that is kind of, call it dead space. We've got all the sponsors set up, all the food trucks, everything's ready to go. And the lead runners usually come in around 11:30, like 11:15, 11:20s is the course record. So from 10 to 30, why not throw one more thing in there?
Love it.
And my partner's kids and I started running together. And that was the clincher. I'd been race directing for almost 20 years. And I was like, nope, I only do the 50K. That's it. And then I started running with his kids and I'm like, okay, now we have a kids race.
I love how you didn't add like a 10K or like, something to make it like, we really want to make this real approachable. No, you've kept the 50K, you've kept the same course, you've kept all these things, but the added race is a kids race. That's totally fair.
Talk about community. Yeah.
And it gives the kids something to do. Like how many times have I been at a race where we're waiting for dad to come in and you need something for those kids to do. So why not put them on a loop? I think it's brilliant. That's amazing.
And it's amazing. I'm a coach for Girls on the Run as well. And like how motivated they are to get a lap counter, whether it's a bead or a bracelet or a sticker. Like kids, we had some kids run 3 or 4 miles in the half hour. like the 8, 12-year-olds. And I was
Wow.
just like, geez, they're like super motivated to just by getting bracelets. It's awesome.
That's awesome. That's solid. So, okay, so talk a little bit about the middle section. So we talked about the beginning and the end. So you've got a slight downhill to start on that, and then you've got a slight uphill to finish. Keep that in mind. But that middle section, like, I'm really curious because I've never been to this area or this region. Like, what are you going to be expecting underfoot? Does it change? Describe a little bit kind of what that middle part feels like running it.
Perfect. Yeah. We'll do maybe like aid station to aid station kind of thing. You've got an aid station at the end of the herb, and then before you start the herb going north, that's 1, and then it switches to aid station 5. 4 miles in is aid station 2, and to get there, you run up the Fragrance Lake Trail. It's become a broader trail. It's super soft, pine needle underfoot, old growth ish forest, like tall trees, low ferns, not a lot of brush in between, like really beautiful in that you can see through the forest. And you run along up around the lake, and then on what we call $2 trail, and $2 trail traverses the front side of the Chuckanuts and then drops you onto Cleater Road. And so there's like a good climb, like a little bit of traversing, and then you kind of descend down into Aid Station 2, which is hosted by Bellingham Distance Project, and they go nuts on their decorations and everything. And then there's a 3-mile road climb. So I really recommend that people like fuel, your footing's easy, like you're climbing, fuel. It's not a steady climb. It like levels out and climbs and levels out and climbs. So you kind of walk, jog, run, however you want to get up that section. And we have another aid station at the top of the road that starts the ridge. And that's hosted by the Seattle Running Club. So they come up from down south, which is really cool. And they run along, then the runners run along the ridge. And that's the section, like our shirt says, run the ridge. And that's the part that everybody's really like curious about. And it used to be an animal path. There was not much of a trail along that ridge over the 20 plus years of race directing. I've watched it evolve. Mountain bikers are involved with the Chuckanuts, and there's much more of a trail along the ridge, but you are on a cliff. There are sections where if you get too close to the edge, it would be bad. You don't want to drop off. So we try and mark and keep people aware. There's they're big rock slabs along the first 2 miles of the ridge that can slow you down a bit if you're like sketched out by mossy rocks, or like we were up there on Saturday and it was icy and you had to really be careful to where you were putting your feet. So, and being March, we don't know what weather we're going to have up there. You are exposed to the wind too. So you might be plenty warm running in a t-shirt down low, but being up along the ridge in a sideways wind or some rain, it's not a normal temperature drop. It's a much more drastic temperature drop. So we ask people to carry the clothing that they'll need and be appropriately dressed for that. Once you get towards the end of the ridge, it starts to become more like that foresty, soft underfoot, winds down to the Lost Lake Trail. And that's where it can get rather muddy, depending on where things are at. The trail work that has been done in the last, I'd say 10 plus years makes for people are not nearly as mud covered as they used to be coming in from the event. The local parks do an amazing job of trail maintenance. And so you can make good time on that back section after you come off the ridge. Really suggest like fueling becomes a big factor at that point. Are you taking care of yourself? Because you do that 7 loop without aid. Sometimes we have a secret aid station at the bottom of the ridge, but I don't allow runners to count on it. I can't guarantee that it's going to be there, that it's conditions dependent. So you're 7 miles on your own. So hopefully you've been fueling well to make time on that backstretch. It kind of climbs and descends, but if you're feeling good, you can move really well along there. And then you turn onto the South Lost Lake Trail, which is a bit of a climb underneath some cliffs. And you're basically below the ridge you were just above. So the course, like if you look at the map, it looks like you're just kind of overlapping, but there's a couple 100 feet between you. And then you got to make your way back up to the ridge because the infamous chin scraper is the notable part of the course. So you come out down South Lost Lake. That's my favorite view. Most people are so focused on their feet at that point. But if you look left when you start descending on South Lost Lake, this time of year, the trees, there's nothing on them. Like the buds, everything's gone. It's dead, but that's your view of the sound. It's a similar view as you get on $2, but that little perspective is pretty sweet. So I encourage people to like look up, check out what's you're on the sound. It's like a gorgeous setting that you get to run along. And then we have an aid station at the bottom. Oh, I lied. There's an aid station for sure at the bottom of Chin Scraper. So that makes the loops like 6 miles. And then you have some support before you start the climb. It's just over a mile. It's like 1.2 miles, but even the speedy people are doing it in about 20 minutes. So it's a good climb through there. And it starts off and you're like, oh, this isn't so bad. Why do they call it Chin Scraper? And then you learn why. And that takes you back up to the top of Cleator Road, which was where you started the whole ridge loop. And you descend the road. And the key part is when you hit the gate, you've got a big hairpin turn. You do not want to run all the way back down Cleator Road. You want a hairpin turn to get onto the Fragrance Lake Trail. And it takes you down. Oh, sorry, WMBC, our Whatcom Mountain Bike Coalition sponsor, or not sponsors, we don't take cash or anything, but they host it with their time and energy, which is a big contribution. Chin Scraper. And then Walla Trails, she's the one that does the aid station 1 and 5. So she hosts the first aid station in the Lost Lake parking lot and then packs everything up and moves it to the bottom of the Fragrance Lake Trail to be on the interurban for everybody and send them north. And they've always got a costume theme. This year, I'm not revealing it, but they are going to go big and it's going to be really fun.
And I want to hear more about all the different groups that have like set aid stations. But you mentioned a Bellingham Distance Project and the fact that you guys were out there just this most previous weekend. It sounds like they hosted maybe like a race preview, a course preview, and some stuff. How are the conditions a month ahead of time relative to like race day? And like, is that something that's done on kind of an annual basis?
We try to. Different people, different organizations have hosted call it pre-run or training run a month out, sometimes 2 weeks out. There'll be a group training run that did not come together this year. The group wasn't able to pull their permits. I'll be out there. I start running it pretty much every weekend at this point, whether I'm in shape or not. So sometimes it takes me a lot longer, but I like to see the course or at least see sections of it. So I'll be out there and posting that to our social media to keep people updated because it does change quite a bit. Like one year we had, like, since COVID, like I said, it's been awesome race week. It's been 60 degrees, beautiful, trails are dry. It's not that muddy. But like 2 years ago, there was 12 inches of snow on the course the Saturday before. And so we go into like, kind of, do we need to change the route? Do people need to carry like a UTMB kit? Like, where are we at? And then like Wednesday, all the snow was gone. Saturday, it was 60. And then the next Saturday, I was back out on the course and it snowed 6 inches. So like, you never know like what we're going to get come race weekend. So when people say, oh, what's the weather going to be like? That's the last thing I can plan for. Or like I can plan on, I should say. I plan for it, but I can't plan
for it to be unpredictable, right? That sounds like what it is.
Totally. Ask me about tents and porta potties and bib numbers. Like that stuff I can plan. Whether I can't.
And there is nothing more beautiful than a sunny Northwest day, whether it's in the summer or the spring or whatever, but it's what makes everyone want to live there.
Yeah. But then the days like today, if I turned my computer around, you know why more people don't live here.
Yeah. So I have one question on Chin Scraper because I read about the infamous Chin Scraper climb. Is that I think I saw that it is technically like a double black mountain bike trail. Is that right? Is it technical? Is it like single track, double? Like how wide is it? Tell us a little more about the infamous Chin Scraper.
Right. And totally, it has changed quite a bit. The name comes from the founding race directors. Wasatch was one of the first 100 milers that he ran. And there's a Chin Scraper about 18 miles into the Wasatch. So this is Little Chin Scraper.
Okay.
And this one comes at you at about 20 miles. So like all that runnable stuff you've been working across, now your legs have paid for that. Fueling is really important. Sorry, the coach in me also comes out when I'm talking about the race course of how to keep
perfect.
Prepared for it.
That's perfect.
It has changed quite a bit. Again, like the whole animal path routes that were out there before, and there was one hiking route that went to the top. Now with the mountain bike community, there is a second route that's a little bit longer and more like it's more for bikes. You wouldn't want to run the double black diamond because of the swoops and how it's built intentionally for bikes. The hiking path still exists and they overlap. From the aid station up, they overlap for a little bit and then they split off and then they come back together after what we call the chin scraper section, the bikes are not on the steepest part where there is a rock that, like, if your footing's not right, you will put your hands down and the rock is right there. Like, you won't fall down. It's that steep. It's right there.
Okay.
And it's not very long, but you got to keep your feet going. And that's usually where a photographer, Glenn Takayama, used to sit at the top of that and catch all sorts of different facial expressions of people coming up the scraper. And then it continues on at a more like climbing but gradual pace step. And then we send people up and over the top, and then you descend pretty steeply down into the upper parking lot, the Cyrus Overlook, where the ridge station is just down the hill.
Okay, cool. What have you seen in terms of like common, or what would you recommend in terms of like footwear for this course?
Oh my gosh, you kind of preempted me with that, and it brought up this really funny story. There was one year that Max King and Hayden Hawk were racing it, and Hayden went for the racing flats, and Max was sponsored by Montrail, so he had these big lugs, and Hayden lost like 6 or 8 minutes on the ridge section of the trail just because of footwear.
Okay.
Like those rock slabs, if there's nothing, or like that soft, duffy underfoot, like if you're just sliding on the top of that. But then when they got down to the last aid station, I think the time difference was 6 minutes, and it's 6 miles to the finish. Max was running sub 6 minute pace, and he comes like barreling across the finish line, and he's looking over his shoulder, and he can't talk because he's breathing so hard. And finally I got out of him. He's like, he's right there. And sure enough, within 30 seconds, Hayden had made up almost 6 minutes on Max T. And so it was all of this like footwear thing. And so the next year Hayden came back with some Hoka traction and he didn't get the course record. I think that was like a snowy year. We had rougher underfoot conditions that year, but he got close to it and wasn't contested for the win that year.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So footwear makes a difference, I guess, is the point, because of the different terrains.
So maybe some traction, but also a light shoe that you can run fast in.
Because of the interurban, it's 12, half of the course is relatively runnable if you've got legs. So, but the other stuff can really slow you down.
Perfect. All right. What else about the race? Like, is anything that just sounds like bring weather options for varying weather? If you're coming out a few days ahead of time, just have some different options, and then kind of decide as you get closer to the day what you're going to want. But maybe it sounds like have a bit of a wind layer or something like that. For any chance that you are up on that ridge and it's chilly.
Wind, or maybe even, the waterproof layers have gotten so much better, like in terms of breathability and stuff, and they're so lightweight. I do think that it could be worth having that in your pack. Yeah, if you're coming out a few days early, I won't be able to tell you. It's changed. Just bring
everything.
Yeah, it's changed so much from Wednesday to Saturday that I'm just, unless you live in town and you just have your closet readily available, I'd come extra ready. And that's just the Pacific Northwest, whether you're running or coming here. You bring a short sleeve shirt, an insulated layer, a raincoat, a beanie, trucker hat, sunglasses. Like, you got to kind of cover your bases now through June, essentially.
Well, I want to repeat a piece of advice you said earlier, which was, as you're coming down the mountain, don't be skipping that last aid station before you've got 6 miles left. But do you have any other pieces of advice, putting on your coach hat and your RD hat, of maybe first-time ultra runners or first-time you might throw their way?
Totally. The one that always comes up for me, because it's such a grand start, like, we've had anywhere from 400. Last year we had 598. We got close to our 600. This year we have registered, we're hoping for a 750 person start. So another 150. And it's big energy, right? Like, as far as we can tell, we can start everybody together still. We might have to do waves this year. We still have to finalize that. But you've got 6 miles where you're running alongside like some of the fastest people in the country right now. And you might not know who you're running next to. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden you run 6 miles in maybe less than an hour. Those top guys run it in less than 40 minutes. And the top women are like 45, 50 minutes. And so you could get pulled along in this net loss 500 feet downhill and forget to eat, forget to drink, running a pace that you maybe run on your speedy days, like your speed training days. And now you've got to start the middle 18, and you got to run that 6 miles back on the way back. So I really try and encourage people to consciously pace those first 6 miles and take in the energy in other ways, just not through your leg speed, so that you can have that available to you. Because it's way more fun to run fast on the last 6 miles and be like cruising up that as it is to like death marching it or cursing my name because you've got 4 more miles to walk to the Fairhaven Park.
That is a fantastic piece of advice, and a piece of advice that almost works for every race, but even more so when you, like you're saying, you have this big wide open area, and like you said, it probably feels easy. You can convince yourself it feels easy within the context of like the excitement of the race and just the event and how many people are there, but checking yourself after that first K or first mile, and then making maybe a good decision on what the pace should be for the rest of the 5 until you get to the trail.
Totally. Yeah. And I think it influences that last 6. So you felt really great. It was so easy, those first 6 miles. I'll just blow through this aid station.
Right.
If it felt, and it doesn't feel the same, I guess is the point to be taken. Yeah.
And maybe similar to, so our last Evergreen episode, we talked about JFK, and we did interview Ian Torrance and Ian and Emily both. And it seems to me like, I'd love to run Chuckanut someday, but like an appeal of both of them is that you kind of do get a little bit of everything. And that is a way for it to test runners. Like it's not suited just to a mountain runner. It's not suited just to a flat, fast runner. And so it kind of is this proving ground where you can exhibit varying skills within running that makes it kind of cool. I mean, it's a very fast course, but you have to also know how to climb and you descend and, all of that in it. So I think that just from the outside seems like it's one kind of big appeal of the uniqueness of the course itself.
Yeah. And I do, like, it was my first ultra, and that feels like really like sentimental to me. And so I want it to feel like a race that is very inviting to that first time experience, like having 5 aid stations and basically one every 6 miles. Like that's a lot of support on a 50K course or whatever. And then the community aspect after, and all of those pieces to be inviting has always been important. And then the way you were noting about the varying levels, another one of my favorite stories was we had this marathoner from Arizona come, and he was a sub 220 marathoner. It was the year that Jeff Rose was running, and those two were duking it out, and we're like, how does it go down? Like the course, depending on where you are at certain points on the course. And in that year, Jeff Rose ended up the mountain runner won. Yeah. But it was a really fun watch, because you're like, what skill level, what skills shine on this course? Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's some of the most fascinating, even as people from other sports start to get into, trail and ultra running. It's like, what's going to translate, what's not, and what, is strength going to beat out, speed or whatever. It is a fascinating thing. So that's awesome. You talked shifting a little bit into the kind of the race directing side of things about the growth of it. Do you have like a cap, or could you keep growing it?
As we've been pushing up against it, we've worked with our permitting agencies. I have 5 different permits I work with, and we've scaled it up appropriately, whatever you want to call it, pretty conservatively every year. And we stayed right around 500 to 600 for a while, and it's just worked really well. But capping it at 600 has often meant, that's one thing about having a race in March, or living in this area anyway, is the attrition rate. Like people sign up for it, take a spot, but we have an attrition of like a minimum of 150 to 250 people that they either get a refund or don't show up, or it's pretty large. So we plan for 600 people, but even come race day, we're still around 450, not starting 500. And so now that I've got the logistics, well, I don't want to ever say that I've totally got it figured out, because something always gets thrown in. That's race directing. I don't know if you get into that with other people, but it's not about what you plan. It's what you don't plan for that you have to be able to pivot and figure out. I could write a book, and I want to interview other runners or race directors to write that book of those stories that the runners never know about.
Yeah,
that happen on race week. But I feel like we're playing with the numbers more now because of the capacity. The race directors, I have 2 co-race directors that I work with, Kevin Douglas and Tyler Pooley, and we've worked together for 8 years now. So we have a lot of comfort level of what we're willing to push on and aspects we need to like figure out in terms of buying food for this many people or how many porta potties. Like all those things are much more easy to figure out a couple years into working together. So we'll see this year. I really am optimistic that this is a good number, and I don't want to lose the vibe. So where is that too? Like how can we still maintain this vibe that we've got the old school, we'll call it the old school vibe, back to the ultra running magazine reference earlier.
Yeah, you mentioned that, and I just want to read for people. So Chuckanut 50K is listed as an old school ultra, and the definition of that is encourages and supports ultra runners of all abilities, has a long history in the sport, curates a roster of volunteers that help each other and every ultra runner to the best of their ability, gives back to the local community, and just understands the importance of maintaining the culture, which is, I think that's an amazing list to be on as a race. And my question for you is, how do you navigate like maintaining that culture and those things that are important while still embracing some of the new things that are in the sport? I noticed this year you've partnered with a group to do live stream activities. So how do you manage that? How do you decide what things get to be a part of Chuckanut?
Well, yeah, it's kind of tricky. Like you just kind of go on your gut, right? I feel like a lot of it this year we applied for and received a grant from the city, a tourism grant. And so that allowed extra budget for the live streaming, which I'm really excited to get to try. Especially I got to announce at Chuckanut,
at UTMB.
UTMB, thank you.
Yeah, I listened. I heard you. I was like, I know the voice.
It was such a cool experience, and it gave me that next level of understanding, like what that does to bring even more community. Like I wanted it to be a community feel. Anything I add to the race has to have that component. And I do feel like going through that, like watching how being on the back end of it, right. And seeing how the chat is, goes crazy and people are involved and logging in from all over the world. I thought, well, I mean, we are a part of the ultra community. We've got this grant to give it a try. Arash, the owner of Active Track, has been coming to Chuckanut for the last 3 years, testing his live streaming equipment on the race. So now we're able to pay him and actually like kind of go with this. We have our finish line announcer will be aired onto the live stream. It won't be like Mountain Outpost. They're doing an incredible job of hiring and everything. We don't necessarily have that component going. We'll just kind of bring you into the finish line and bring you into the Chuckanut 50K as we're experiencing it. But to make those decisions, or some of the things I feel like keep it local, is we have not taken a grand sponsorship. The biggest sponsorship we've ever accepted was from Hoka, and all of the money that is sponsor money that is brought to the race goes right into the elite prize purse. In the case of Hoka, they actually gave additional money that we put towards the finishers prizes. So we were able to do like a much fancier finish prize. I think that was one of the years we did scarves, which like that would be cost prohibitive if we didn't have additional sponsor money, because we also keep our entry fee relatively, like I think on par or low. We charge $135 for the 50K experience, which
I'll call that below the market value.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Like I look around, I'm like, oh, I just don't know. I want it to be accessible for people. This year we did require, I feel like this is a really important factor for race directors in general, is in terms of keeping the vibe of what's important to trail runners, and it's trail work or volunteer experience. And I've made it optional for the last 4 years. And this year we decided to require it, and people have to report it, much like you do in a 100-miler. It's almost like 4 hours of trail work, or the way to make it accessible is like, what is your 4 hours worth? I'm not going to tell you how much you have to donate, but if you are not going to the trail and working for 4 hours, like, how do you value your time? Please make that donation to a trail organization. And I think it's just that like education piece of these trails don't just exist for you to race on. Like we have to still contribute to the organizations that are keeping them alive and healthy and well for us.
Yeah. So one question I have is just around kind of, I guess, first of all, like I said earlier, like, thank you for being a female race director. I was involved in the US Trail Running Conference last year, and it was really cool to see a handful of female race directors from across the US there and show up. And so I guess kind of this is a little bit more of a, I think when I was listening to your Ginger Runner Live episode, you guys were talking about woo-woo stuff. So this is a little more of a woo-woo question, but what do you think that as a female you bring to kind of the race directing position, or is there something that you feel like is a unique thing that that you can bring to race directing as a female? I mean, I believe you give everyone a hug at the finish line, which I know Debo would do that as well at the end of his his races, but like just thoughts on like your position there, and like how you maybe feel like that influences your job as a race director.
I kind of joke, but I have an organization level that's kind of ridiculous. I love spreadsheets, and I don't know if that's female specific, but multitasking spreadsheets, thinking of all the little details, attention to detail. And I do think all of the racing I got to do in my career around the world and pulling ideas, things I loved about the way races in Japan, races in China, running events, I got to run around Kilimanjaro, like all these experiences, like how do those come in to play a part in the growth and community of the Chuckanut 50K? So I don't know that it's female specific. I just know that about myself, and that's what I try and prioritize on the event.
Yeah, I think I observed that too. It's just the fact that you're an athlete and that you you understand exactly what it's like to be in the race yourself, and at the front of the race, and being a professional or doing it at a leisurely pace, that you can relate to that and kind of translate that into how you run it. I think is I don't know. Yeah, a lot of the best race directors are runners themselves, and you're a very experienced one. So I'm sure that all shows on race day, because I've never heard anything but good, positive things about the experience of going to Chuckanut.
Right on. But and like it's excitement. I had a rough year 3 years ago where I was almost ready to like, you know what, I think it's time to hand over the reins. Like I'm not enjoying this experience. I had a great time on race day, but all of the planning and all of the posts, I mean, that's a big thing of race directing, is it's not over when the race is over. Like you're like, there's a whole nother week of wrap up and cleanup and results and all that stuff. And I was not enjoying any of it. And I was like, well, you know what? I need to leave the party while it's still fun. Like I don't want to put on a race when I'm not enjoying it. Thankfully, that was year 29. And I was like, well, I will definitely get it through 30. And so I got it through and the 30th was awesome. We had so much fun. And the 30th, like planning this year, totally loving it. And so I can fortunately say in hindsight that my life was in a rough spot and therefore impacted my race directing experience. It wasn't that that I was done race directing. I thought I was done because of how everything was impacting. But that, like, it is a piece of, I think, doing it this long, it's such a piece of my life. Like, I mean, I jokingly say, like, I left the divorce with it. Like, it came with me. Like, I took the race. My friends are empty nesting. I have a race that's as old as their kids. Like, this thing is like a big part of how I run my year, how I think about the winter, where I allow myself to travel. Like, all these things are impacted by tying myself to Bellingham, Washington, the second or the third Saturday of March for the last 23 years. And I kind of can't imagine it without it at this point, even though I was like so close to, is it time? Is this the sign? Is this my woo-woo moment of like, oh, it's time to pass it on? And nope, I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere for a while.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
Well, seeing that, I have just maybe just one last question about just maybe your vision for the race in the future. Now that you've said, okay, I've kind of got over this hump. I know I really still like this race directing. Do you have a vision for Chuckanut 50K in the future beyond?
Okay, before you answer, Krissy, think about that for a sec. I just want to mention a few of the people that have run the race, because it is a who's who.
Yeah.
I think that's a great question to finish on. But I mean, the likes of Ellie Greenwood, Matt Daniels, Claire Gallagher, we mentioned Max King, Keely Henninger. Last year, Francesco Pupi running, coming internationally specifically to run Chuckanut. Sage Canaday, of course, Hayden, Devin Yanko, Hannah Allgood, Alicia Shea, Io Wang, David Laney, Adam Peterman, and that's just the start of the list of the people that have run the course and have thrown down some cool times on it. And then current course records, just so that we can share with the audience, would be Francesco Pupi at 3:26 in 2024, last year. Yep. And then Jody Adams Moore in 2013 at 4:01.
Which, I mean, maybe talk a little bit about Jody Adams more, because that's a name that I don't think, a lot of ultra running fans right now might know, but she is an absolute legend.
Total legend. She was like, I put her and Jen Shelton in a like similar gutsy racer. Like they just go for it. I was always very conservative, like pace myself, have a lot to give at the end, like very different racing strategies that I represent and Jody and Jen represents. And I give Jody total credit. The only way to break her record is to run a gutsy race. You can't run Chuckanut conservative and break her time. Like you have to be ready to give it the whole time. I saw her come through the first aid station that year with the lead men. And I was like, oh gosh, girl, you're going to blow up. What are you doing? Like in my mind. And she did it start to finish. And the gutsy part of that type of racer, I've always thought was they go hoping that the finish line comes first. It's either the blow up or the finish line. It's going to both are going to happen. Which one happens first? And I just totally admire, I could never do it, but
That's
totally
awesome.
admire that type of racer. And so Keely Henninger, I would say, has given the biggest shot at trying to go for that record. And the couple times that she's come across the line, like within 4 to 5 minutes, she's gotten close. She's like, that is untouchable. Like I was giving it like, it's huge props to what Jody did that year. Super cool.
2013 course record still holding strong.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And some amazing women have gone and raced again. Like last year we had, no, that was, gosh, the years start to blur together. But the last couple of years we've had like the top 20 women finish under the time that the men used to win it. Like men would win in 4 to 4:20. And we've had the top 20 women under that time for a couple of years. It's just fascinating to see how fast the sport's gone on the same course.
Yeah. And the women's fields in all of these races. I mean, it's like I feel like all the races last year, unless you were breaking a course record, you were not on the podium at these races. It was like, what is happening? Yeah, women's ultra running, trail running, and ultra running is on a different level. But sorry, back to Russ's excellent finishing question. What's your vision? What's your future vision of the race?
It's $1 million question, and don't feel pressure to provide too much insight here, but I'm curious, especially as you described going through those last few years of race directing and then realizing that no, this really is still a passion for you.
And I think that's important. Like I've been offered other events to race direct, and I've given it heavily like consideration. And I think the vision or the thing that's maintaining what's consistent is that I just do one and I put everything into one. And it's my baby. It's the thing that I just kind of keep coming back to. And I have 2 amazing co-race directors that are on the same page with me in that terms of energy. They get that same vibe. And then that compounds out by our volunteer crew that comes back year after year, running those aid stations, flagging runners at the cross streets. Like there's all these people that have that same focus on keeping the race feeling this way as we add food trucks, as we grow the field size, as we add chip timing, like all these things that keep adding. There's still like the concentrated effort of growth is keeping the community vibe of like passion, love, our 50K, third weekend of March. Like I was walking around town today handing out posters to like the different restaurants and businesses and saying, hey, we have all these runners coming to town. You're going to be busy. And they're like, we've noticed. Thank you for giving us a month out heads up. Like it's noticed in the town that Chuckanut 50K comes to town. So it's not much of a vision. It's not like changing. I'm not selling it. I'm not bringing in some grand sponsor. It's just holding on to what this is as we grow, like I guess by my gut or organically or whatever word you want to throw on it.
Yeah. Well, I love that because as it grows in terms of size, which it seems like you're able to do a little bit, I think it probably just amplifies that community.
Hope so.
Cultural. And I think everyone, in the sport loves the finish line hangout and staying around and discussing what happened on the day and creating an atmosphere that fosters that. And so I think that's amazing. And you're bringing obviously great economy to the area, but getting them involved as well. So that's a beautiful thing. Okay. Well, thank you so much for telling us all about it. I think that my burning last little question is, do you think that based on the entrant list this year for 2025, do you think either of the course records are at risk? Do you think they're going to go down?
It's
the women's course record has stood through all this growth.
And we watched Matt Daniels and Francesco Pupi and like the next 5 guys push it next year. Like we were seeing crewing like leveled up. There was so many pieces, and like that was only at 2 aid stations. We saw so many, like the margin for is so slim right now. Like everything has to go perfect. So
oh yeah, I think I saw Matt Daniels like handheld handoff that was just, not stopping, just dropping and grabbing. Like there's no time to stop. So yeah. Do you think they're at risk?
No, I always give it credit. Another piece I always give credit is the weather, the environment, the climate, like what's happening on that day. Both of those days that those times were set were ideal conditions. And this course is one that the conditions are a factor. Like that doesn't go away. So I hold that in there. No matter who's standing on the line, the conditions will be a part of that equation. I hope so. It's so
condition dependent, we'll say.
Yeah. And I get to ride it. I always give a course record bonus out of our little pool. So that's always fun to like hand over a couple extra $100.
Awesome. And so everyone should go follow the Chuckanut 50 on Instagram. You do all those updates there and the kind of get an idea of what the course looks like beforehand, and anything else that you'd encourage people to follow, or anyone else you want to shout out about it.
We are doing on March 1st, we're doing a Meet the Race Directors. So if people wanted to come on and ask questions, whether they're racing or not.
Oh, that's amazing.
If this will come out before March 1st.
Yeah, it will.
We'll have a Q&A on a Zoom, like a virtual meetup. Me and the local co-race director are going to go hang out at Wander, one of our sponsor, local brewery sponsor, and chat with people, answer questions about the course. There's some videos on the website that will show to give kind of previews of the route. Yeah, so that would be cool to have people join whether they're racing or not. And we'd love to meet them.
Cool. That's awesome that you're offering that.
Yeah.
Amazing. Cool. Well, thank you, Krissy. It was an honor to chat with you and learn more about Chuckanut. It's definitely on both of our bucket lists. And thanks for everything you do. And we appreciate you coming on.
Oh, appreciate the time. Thanks. And all the like long-winded stories. There's so many of them. I get going. I appreciate you. We love the
stories. The stories are the best. We're here for the stories.
Totally.
Thanks.
Thank you